Thank you for joining us. Israel has launched more attacks across Syria with a number of military sites targeted in just the past 12 hours. Israeli media say the Air Force destroyed warehouses storing missiles and rocket launchers near the town of Qastal in the Damascus countryside. They also hit ammunition depots in the town of Muhajja east of Deraa. Well, let's discuss these latest developments in Syria with Rob Geist Pinfold now. He's a lecturer in peace and security at Durham University. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert. Let's start with what's been happening in these Israeli strikes in Syria, which are continuing. We saw 61 missile attacks on military sites across Syria in a period of 5 hours on Saturday evening. What do we know about what the Israelis are targeting, and what is the aim here? What's the objective?
Well, they seem to be going after anything and everything really that's associated with the former regime. And at the start, they were attacking targets in Damascus that didn't seem like military targets, but there was all sorts of speculation that they must have had intelligence that there were assets hidden there that the Assad regime might not have declared. Now, the Israelis sold these strikes to the Americans to say, look, you know, we're getting rid of the chemical weapons, we're targeting the chemical and biological weapons sites. And the Americans said, OK, you know, that's legitimate. But since then, there's been a lot more disconnect between Washington and Jerusalem because the Israelis have simply started targeting anything really associated with the former regime.
Right, and they've also deployed ground troops into and beyond the demilitarized buffer zone for the first time in 50 years. Are they taking this step just in the context of the security of Israel, as they say, or are there other ambitions here?
I think they're doing it simply because they can. I think there is a security aspect here. They don't know about the new regime. They don't know who's in charge. They don't know who's on the other side. The Israelis and the Israeli intelligence was taken by surprise with these developments, just as much as the rest of the world was. So I think the Israelis are erring on the side of caution here. The problem is when they err on the side of caution, they also escalate because, as you say, they've taken over 250 square kilometres of territory and they've launched an unprecedented number of strikes. You mentioned 61 strikes. Over a year prior, over the entire course of a year, Israel struck Syria 220 times approximately. So it just shows you that, OK, the Israelis might think they're erring on the side of caution, but actually they're escalating tensions, especially with the new government in power in Syria.
Right. And what has this new government in power been saying? Ahmed al-Sharaa has been speaking, and he talked about Syrians being too tired to fight of another conflict, in reference probably to what Israel has been doing. What is the message right now that's coming from this new administration?
I think he's calling Israel's bluff. He's saying to the Israelis, you have got no legitimacy to strike, you've got no legitimacy to occupy, because here I am telling you we have no desire or intention to fight you. And this is a huge change. Don't forget, Syria has kind of been the core state that has been fighting Israel for decades. Israelis often talk of their own Syria syndrome, their kind of obsession with this idea that Syria is behind everything. So this is a huge paradigm shift from a guy who used to be affiliated to ISIL and al-Qaeda of any organisation. You know, it's so surprising and so shocking. So I think he's saying to the international community, look, you know, here's my intentions. Now you have to stop the Israelis. And a lot of the time we're hearing people saying, OK, well, Jolani's saying, or as he is now, Sharaa is saying things that we like to hear, stuff about respect for the rule of law and minorities and women's rights, but we'll judge him by his deeds. Now, remember when the Syrian regime fell, Benjamin Netanyahu went to the border and said, we want peace with the new Syrian government and the Syrian people. But then look at Israel's intentions here with all these strikes and these occupations. So I think he's flipping round the way that the international community are judging him to say, OK, what about the Israelis? They might be saying one thing, but they're doing another. All
right. Speaking of the international community, they met in Aqaba, Jordan on Saturday, trying to present a united front as far as what the next steps and what Syria's future should look like. But we have various stakeholders here with various interests in Syria. How do you see them working together, if at all, for the future of Syria? Can they work together?
Well, I think that the point of the conference yesterday was for the international community and these key players to try and grab back some agency because no one saw this coming. No one saw the fall of the regime. Remember, a day before the rebels reached Damascus, you heard Egypt, Jordan and other countries who don't like the Assad regime calling for a ceasefire. So events on the ground really overtook whatever it was they were planning. And as I say, they had no prior warning that this was going to happen, the only possible exception being Turkey because of their close ties to HDS. So the US is now trying to bring all these parties together and work out a middle ground, some way to protect, for example, the SDF, its relative allies in eastern Syria, but at the same time to appease Turkey, who are very much opposed to the FDF presence. So it's about trying to find that middle ground.
In 2 months, we're going to have a different US administration. Will it be the same? I mean, will they have the same approach towards Syria? Briefly, Rob.
Well, no, is the long and short of it. It was Donald Trump who tried to withdraw US troops from Syria. And actually, shortly after he did that, that's when Turkey began an unprecedented offensive against SDF-dominated territory. So I think Turkey knows its stock is very high at the moment, but will try and bide its time for the new administration to come in, which might be more supportive of its goals and interests.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Always good to get your analysis. Rob Geist Pinfold joining us here on the News Hour.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.